Welcome in. Today it's a queen's pawn scrap. Patelsahil with the white pieces, Lask 007 with black. It starts calm and polite, and then white's queen decides to go on the kind of road trip that gives chess coaches nightmares. Deep into enemy territory, snacking on pawns, with the whole board closing in to trap her. So keep one eye on that queen. The question the entire game hangs on. Can she get home alive? We open quietly. The knight steps out, planting a flag near the center without committing to anything just yet. Black mirrors with a knight of his own. Totally playable. Just a touch provocative, sitting in front of the c-pawn. Stockfish would prefer a calmer central setup. But hey, a little personality never hurt anyone. Now the real estate grab begins. White claims the center. Black plants a pawn right back. Aprupe central standoff. White offers the c-pawn, Queen's Gambit style, leaning on that d5 point. And here's the first little wobble. Developing the knight feels natural, but the engine wanted e6 first to prop up the d5 pawn. As played, White's pressure on the center quietly grows. Small thing, but these add up. More development, more pressure on d5. Textbook. The bishop swings out to pin the knight and lean on f3. White sidesteps the pin and plunks the knight on a juicy central square. Black trades it off rather than let it sit there glaring at him. White recaptures, and notice that pawn now sits on e5 like a thorn, cramping Black's whole kingside. The knight retreats to nudge that e5 pawn. Reasonable on the surface, but it walks into trouble. The engine like grabbing space with d4 instead. Now White's about to get busy. White can't resist the free pawn. It's fine, but the cleaner route was simply recapturing cxd5, keeping the queen at home. Bringing Her Majesty out this early is always a little risky. Hold that thought. And this is a genuine mistake. Black shoes the queen with the bishop, but it swings the door wide open. The engine wanted the solid c6. Instead, White's queen is about to go on an adventure she will never forget. Watch this. There she goes, snatching the b7 pawn. Greedy? Absolutely. But it's the best move on the board, and that rook in the corner is suddenly feeling very nervous. Black kicks the queen, hoping to trap her. The manhunt is officially on. She doesn't flee. She eats another pawn on the way out. 2 up and behind enemy lines. Bold lady. Black makes a home for the bishop, building a fianchetto on the long diagonal. White spins a move on this little pawn, and the engine isn't impressed. It wanted nb5, jumping in with threats. The queen on a7 is deep in hostile territory, and slow moves give Black time to organize the search party. Careful here. Black develops the bishop, but misses his moment. Next 5 grabbed the pawn back and kept the tension alive. He lets White off the hook. White props up that e5 pawn and grabs kingside space. The big pawn is becoming a real bully. Black tucks the king away. Sensible, though the engine had other ideas. Still, king's safety first is rarely a bad instinct. A quiet move that's a touch too quiet. Stockfish preferred g3, getting the kingside humming. White's still clearly better, just slightly less crisp. Now Black goes hunting the queen with the knight, but it's the wrong tool for the job. The engine was begging for f6 striking at e5. Instead, Black hands White exactly the tempo needed to untangle. The escape plan is taking shape. White calmly develops the bishop and gets ready to castle. No panique. The queen will find her way home. Black swings the rook over to attack the queen on a7. She looks cornered now, or is she? Because this is where it gets interesting. And here's the escape, qb7. The only move that keeps the queen alive and the win intact. She slips 1 square down the diagonal. The rook can't touch her, the knight can't reach her, and she's still raking the board. Grab the rook with xa8, and the knight just takes her back. This quiet retreat is the whole point. Sometimes the bravest move is the calm one. Black chases one more time, but this just lets the queen waltz back to safety with tempo. The engine wanted f6 to fight in the center. Now the smoke clears. White is simply 2 pawns up with a beautiful position. Home at last. The queen returns to a great central square. Mission accomplished, 2 pawns richer. Black finally challenges the e5 pawn. Better late than never. White takes, ripping open lines toward black's king. Black recaptures with the rook, but the engine preferred the bishop, bxf6, keeping the rook flexible. That rook on f6 is going to get pushed around. White castles to safety, solid and very human, even if the engine liked the aggressive h4 pawn storm. Tucking the king away never hurts when you're up material. Black shuffles the knight back and misses nxc4, winning a pawn back. These little oversights keep gift-wrapping the edge for white. White develops the bishop onto the long diagonal. Good idea, though e4 was sharper, blasting open the center. That bishop on b2 will have plenty to say later. The knight bounces to a strong central post. The queen eyes the king's side and that knight. Pressure building quietly. And again, black retreats instead of grabbing the loose c4 pawn with nxc4. He keeps leaving groceries on the counter, and white's advantage is now genuinely large. The knight leaps to a dominant square, eyeing all sorts of nasty jumps. The rook lurches to f5, a bit loose. rxf4 was the cleaner grab. That rook's about to feel exposed. White trades off black's fianchettoed bishop, peeling away a key defender of the king. Black recaptures with the king, getting a little drafty around there. The bishop pokes at that exposed rook on f5. Black's pieces are getting all tangled up, defending the rook, but h5 was sturdier. The knight on h6 is offside, basically a spectator. White cashes in the bishop for the rook, winning the exchange. The engine had a fancier idea with Rad 1, but winning an exchange is never a tragedy. Black recaptures. Material's lopsided now. White is comfortably ahead. The knight jumps in, harassing the king and eyeing weak squares. Black's queen infiltrates, scraping for any counterplay she can find. White kicks the bishop and grabs even more center. Just methodical. Black offers the queen trade. When you're losing, swapping pieces only helps the other guy, but there's not much choice here. White recaptures, and look, the h-file just cracked open for the rook. Little bonuses everywhere. The bishop retreats. It had to move. White centralizes the last rook. Every piece is pulling its weight now. The knight finally rejoins the game, trying to plug some holes. White trades knights, perfectly fine, though keeping it on with nf3 kept more bite. When you're winning, simplifying is comforting. The engine just gets greedy. The king recaptures and stands in the open. Exposed, but black has bigger problems. White starts rolling the pawns, squeezing black tighter. Black grabs space, but this loosens things. c5 was more to the point. Pawns that can't go back always leave holes behind them. The pawn duo marches on. These passers are the future. Black tries to wake the rook up behind the lines, and the pawn lunges forward, a dagger right next to black's king. Black blocks, but h5 gave the rook some air. He's getting squeezed harder. A regrouping move. Though here, just pushing the a-pawn was faster. When you got a passer on the rim, run it. Black's rook gets active on the third rank. At least it's doing something. Tidying up the king. Safe enough, but again, that a-pawn was itching to run. Black pushes on the king's side, but bh5 was more useful. He's just shuffling at this point. White repositions the rook, keeping black's pieces hemmed in. Black pushes the pawn, hoping to stir up a little chaos. White takes. Black recaptures, forced. Now, there's a lone h-pawn limping along. Here's a real slip from white. Pushing the a-pawn looks logical, but re4 first was far stronger, snapping up that h-pawn while staying coordinated. It's still completely winning. Mind you, just don't tell Stockfish. It's wincing. Black shoves the pawn as far as it'll go, hoping it becomes a nuisance. White blunts it. The h-pawn is going nowhere. The bishop repositions. Black's just trying to hang on now. The a-pawn rolls forward. The race is on, though only one side is really racing. The rook swings back to deal with the runner. One step from glory. The pawn is 2 squares from a new queen. Black plants the rook in front to blockade. For now, white supports the pawn from behind, the textbook way to push a passer. Black makes his own passed pawn, dreaming of a counter race. White attacks the c-pawn, though just shoving a7 immediately was crushing. Sometimes the simplest push is the strongest. The bishop scrambles over to escort the c-pawn. Another detour. A7 was still screaming to be played. White's making this harder than it needs to be, but a position this good forgives a lot. Black reroutes the rook, looking for activity. White snags the h-pawn with the king. Fine, a free pawn, but that a-pawn is still the star of the show. Don't get distracted by pennies when there's a jackpot waiting. The rook hops to the open file, hunting for checks. Finally, the pawn reaches the 7th rank, one square from a brand new queen. Black has to deal with this right now. A spite check buying a single moment. The king sidesteps. No harm done. Back goes the rook to blockade again. It can't leave, or the pawn simply queens. White probes the c-pawn. The engine like g4 to roll the king's side, but White's circling the win patiently. A check from the bishop, swiping a tempo. The king steps aside, unbothered. Black's checks are running out of fuel. The bishop rushes home to help watch the a-pawn. White scoops up the c-pawn. Black's only passer gone. Now it's pure technique. Black finally captures the a-pawn, but at the cost of letting White's rook run wild. That trade-off is brutal. A check that hits the king and ties down the rook. White's pieces are everywhere now. The king tucks into the corner. Oh, now this one stings. White had a force sequence with rd3 that was lights out, and instead pushes b4, throwing away most of the advantage. The eval tumbles from utterly winning all the way down to merely completely winning. That's the luxury of a position this good. You can blunder and still be up a small fortune. But yes, Stockfish just spat out its coffee. Black grabs the chance to check and pester. The king marches up the board. In the endgame, the king is a fighter, not a hider. The bishop redeploys, still hunting for some kind of fortress. A check, though the engine just want to centralize the king with kd4. Minor stuff. White's rook and king are running the show. The king steps out. White pushes the c-pawn a hair too early. kd4 first kept everything tidy. Still winning, but black gets a flicker of life. In the endgame, pawns need their king to hold their hand. The bishop blockades the pawn. White shoulders the pawn forward anyway. This runner can't be stopped forever. Black's rook keeps fishing for counterplay it doesn't really have. A check, though just pushing c7 was even faster. White's taking the scenic route to the win. The king shuffles over. And now the net tightens. The engine already sees mate on the horizon. The rook cuts the king off. Black flails for one more check. The pawn steps to the 7th. One more square to go. The bishop makes one last desperate dive to cover the queening square. Promotion. With check, a brand new queen crashes the party. Black can grab her, sure, but watch closely. Black takes the queen and walks straight into it. Rxc8, checkmate. The rook delivers the final blow. The king has nowhere to run, and that's a wrap. A long, grinding win, sealed in style. So, what do we take away from all this? Two things. First, when you're winning, you don't need fireworks. You need patience and pieces that work together. And second, when a piece looks trapped, slow down and find the quiet escape before you grab in a panic. White was far from perfect here. There were wobbles, there was a coffee-spitting blunder, but the advantage was big enough to survive all of it. Thanks for watching. Now go find your own queen's wild road trip.